Hey everyone, welcome to Cyber Platter. I'm Navya. We are starting this new series on vulnerability management interview question and answers. So this is part one. There'll be other parts, and as and when I upload them, I will link them in the description box. So let's get started. First question, what is the difference between a vulnerability and an exploit? So vulnerability is a weakness or flaw in a system, software, hardware, or process that could potentially be exploited by an attacker. On its own, vulnerability does not cause harm, but it is a potential risk. For example, consider you leave your home with your front door unlocked. The door being unlocked is the vulnerability, and this is a weakness in your security system. Just like that, in cybersecurity, if you want to consider an example, an unpatched operating system, weak passwords, or a misconfigured firewall, all of these are vulnerabilities. That is, weaknesses or flaws. Now, what is an exploit? So, this is a method, tool, or technique used by an attacker to take advantage of a vulnerability. It is the action that turns a vulnerability into a real security breach. So, in the previous example, I told you leaving your door unlocked is a vulnerability. Now consider a thief notices your unlocked door and he walks in to steal your valuables. The act of taking advantage of the unlocked door is the exploit. So in cybersecurity, a hacker using a SQL injection attack to access a database through an unvalidated input field is an exploit. So here that unvalidated input field is the vulnerability and the hacker taking advantage of it is the exploit. So in short, vulnerability is the weakness and exploit is the means to take advantage of that weakness. Let's go to the next question. What is vulnerability management? Vulnerability management is an ongoing process. So it is the ongoing process of identifying, evaluating, prioritizing, treating, and reporting security vulnerabilities in systems, networks, applications, and software. It is a key part of an organization's cybersecurity strategy. It is designed to reduce the risk of attackers exploiting weaknesses. Now let's see how it works. First is identification. So you discover and scan assets, that is servers, applications, endpoints, cloud resources, and so on. And then you use vulnerability scanners, threat intelligence, and manual testing to detect known weaknesses, misconfigurations, or outdated software. That is about identification. Next is evaluation and prioritization. Here you assess vulnerabilities based on severity, for example, using CVSS scores. CVSS stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System. There is a question on this. We will talk more about this in a bit. So for now, understand that you assess your vulnerabilities based on severity of the vulnerabilities. Exploitability. Exploitability is how easy it is for attackers to use it. Next is business impact. So which systems or data could be affected? So you need to prioritize issues to address the most critical risks first. Next step is treatment. In this we have remediation, that is fixing the vulnerability. Example, patching software, applying configuration changes. Next one is mitigation, that is you reduce the risk when immediate remediation is not possible. For example, you can add firewall rules, disabling features, and so on. Next one is acceptance. In very rare cases, we accept the risk as well. So here we decide to accept the risk if it is very low, if the risk is very low, or if a fix is not feasible. Next part is verification. That is, you rescan and test systems to confirm that vulnerabilities have been addressed. Ensure that patches or fixes did not break other functions, like you perform regression testing. Next is reporting and continuous monitoring. So you document vulnerabilities, actions taken, and residual risks. And then you track trends over time to improve future response. And you continuously monitor for new threats since new vulnerabilities emerge every day. So these are the basic steps in a vulnerability management system. So you might ask, why does it matter? Why vulnerability management matters? Because without vulnerability management, organizations leave open doors for attackers to exploit. And this can lead to data breaches, ransomware, downtime, or compliance violations. So in short, vulnerability management is about finding weaknesses before the attackers do and fixing them systematically. Next question, explain the concept of CVSS. Like I said before, CVSS stands for Common Vulnerability Scoring System. CVSS is an open standard. It is used for rating the severity of software vulnerabilities. So it gives each vulnerability a numerical score from 0 to 10, and this represents how severe the vulnerability is, and this helps organizations prioritize remediation. 0 if there is no vulnerability, 0.1 to 3.9 is low, 4 to 6.9 is medium severity, 7 to 8.9 is high, and 9 to 10 is critical vulnerability, that is critical severity. So CVSS provides a consistent vendor neutral method for comparing vulnerabilities. So what is vendor neutral? A solution, standard, or system is called vendor neutral when it is not tied to a specific company, brand, or product. So it is vendor neutral, CVSS. CVSS helps prioritize which vulnerabilities to fix first. It is used by security databases like NVD, that is National Vulnerability Database, and many vulnerability scanners. CVSS calculates severity using 3 metric groups: base metrics, temporal metrics, and environmental metrics. First one is base metrics. Base metrics describe the intrinsic fundamental characteristics of a vulnerability. So these metrics do not change over time or by environment. Base metrics is derived from other factors. Let's look at them. The first one is the attack vector. So how the attack is delivered is what is attack vector. It can be physical, that is the attacker must be physically present. Example, say USB exploits. Local, attacker needs local or system access. Adjacent, attacker must be on the same network segment, for example, the same Wi-Fi. Network, that is the vulnerability is exploitable remotely across the internet. Next is attack complexity. These are conditions required for exploitation. It can be low, that is simple or reliable attack, or high, that is it requires rare or special conditions. Next is the privileges required, that is what level of access the attacker must already have. None, that is no authentication is needed. Low, basic user rights needed. High, admin or root needed. Next one is user interaction. So this talks about whether a victim's action is required. That is none, that is fully automatic attack. Next one is required, that is victim must click, open or execute something. Impact metrics, that is what happens if the vulnerability is exploited. Confidentiality, can sensitive data be stolen? Integrity, can data be altered or modified? Availability, can the system be made unavailable? For example, denial of service attack. So that is how the base metrics is calculated, by taking all these factors into account. Next metrics is temporal metrics, that is these capture factors that change over time as the threat landscape evolves. So base metrics, I told you they do not change, but temporal metrics, they change over time. First factor here is exploit code maturity, that is how developed and available the exploit is. Unproven, Here, no exploit exists. For example, a new vulnerability is announced with no working attack yet. Next is proof of concept. Demonstration code is available. Example, researcher posts a test script on GitHub. Next one, functional. A reliable working exploit exists. Example, attackers use the exploit in targeted attacks. Next, high. Exploits here are widely available. Easy to use tools exist. For example, scripts included in Metasploit for anyone to run. Next factor in temporal metrics is remediation level, that is the status of a fix or workaround. First, official fix, that is vendor patch has been released. For example, Microsoft issues a Windows security update. Next is a temporary fix, that is a workaround or mitigation is available. For example, disable a service until a patch is ready. Next, unavailable, that the fix or a workaround is unavailable, it does not exist yet. For example, vendor still investigating the vulnerability. Next factor in temporal metrics is report confidence, that is how certain we are that the vulnerability is real. Unknown, that is reports are unverified, for example, rumors on a forum or no proof yet. Reasonable, some supporting evidence exists, example, security researchers reproduce partial results. Next is confirmed, multiple trusted sources verify it, example, published in NVD with vendor confirmation. So these temporal metrics don't change the core severity, that is the base metrics, but they help organizations to judge urgency. The third metrics that CVSS score relies on is environmental metrics. These are organization-specific factors that affect how severe the vulnerability is in your environment. Environmental metrics depends on two other factors. First one is modified base metrics, that is organizations can adjust. So before that, base metrics we said that it depends on 5 factors, that is attack vector, attack complexity, privileges required, user interaction and impact metrics. So organizations can adjust these values based on how the vulnerability behaves in their environment. And then there are security requirements, that is how important each CIA, that is confidentiality, integrity and availability factors, is to the organization. For example, consider confidentiality requirement is sensitive data involved, for example, patient's data. In integrity requirement is data accuracy critical, for example, financial systems. Availability requirement is uptime critical, example, hospital systems or online banking. So a vulnerability with high availability impact is more severe for a hospital, that is life critical systems, than for a test server used internally. So to summarize, in CVSS, base metrics is the core technical severity, temporal metrics is the severity adjusted for exploitability and patch availability, environmental metrics is the severity adjusted for business context. Next question, how do you prioritize vulnerabilities? First, you consider severity scores, CVSS, that is you start with CVSS base scores, that is like I said, critical, high, medium and low. But you don't rely on these numbers alone, you also need to consider real world context. A CVSS 9.8 flaw on an internal lab system may be less urgent than a CVSS score of 7.5 exposed to the internet. Next one is exploitability. You need to check if public exploits are available. Example, Metasploit modules, GitHub POCs. You also look for in-the-world exploitation reports from CISA, vendors or threat intel feeds. So an in-the-world report means if there is real evidence that attackers are actively exploiting a vulnerability outside of a lab or research environment. That is, you're trying to say that this vulnerability is not just a theoretical bug or a proof of concept, that it is being used in actual cyber attacks. Once you do this, you act faster on vulnerabilities with known active exploits. Next, you consider asset criticality. That is, you prioritize vulnerabilities on mission critical systems, like for example, finance servers, medical equipment, or customer facing applications. If a vulnerability affects a high value target, it gets top priority even if the score is lower. Next, you consider exposure. That is the system internet facing or internal only? Internet exposed vulnerabilities pose greater risk and should be patched first. Next, you consider what happens if the vulnerability is exploited, that is the business impact. Will there be a data breach? Will there be a downtime costing thousands per minute? Will there be regulatory penalties from, say, GDPR, HIPAA, or PCI DSS? Next, you consider compensating controls. So if there's a firewall rule or intrusion detection system or strong segmentation reducing exposure, then the urgency may be lower. If there are no protections, then the priority is higher. Next, you consider patch availability. If a vendor patch or workaround exists, the vulnerabilities can be addressed quickly. If no patch is available, prioritize mitigations, for example, blocking ports or disabling features. So in practice, this is how the flow works. First, you pull vulnerability scan results from your vulnerability scanner. You filter critical, actively exploited internet-facing systems, and then you patch them immediately. Next, you handle high severity on critical assets. And then you address medium or low risks based on business impact and patch cycles. In short, you consider severity, exploitability, asset value, exposure, and business impact to prioritize your vulnerabilities. The goal is to fix the most dangerous vulnerabilities first, not just the highest scoring ones. Next question, what is CVE? That is common vulnerabilities and exposures. So CVE is a system for assigning unique identifiers to publicly known security vulnerabilities. Each vulnerability gets a standardized ID so that everyone, like for example, vendors, security teams, or tools, can reference the same issue consistently. CVE is managed by MITRE Corporation in collaboration with NIST. This is the format of a CVE number, that is CVE year and number. For example, CVE 2021 34527. This is print nightmare Windows vulnerability. 2021, it says the year that it was published. 34527. This is the unique sequence number. Why is CVE important? First, that it provides standardization, that is security vendors, researchers, and organizations all speak the same language. Next is tracking. It is easy to look up details in databases like NVD, that is National Vulnerability Database. Next is prioritization. Organizations can quickly map CVEs to their assets and decide which ones need urgent action. Now let's see how CVE relates to CVSS. CVE gives the vulnerability an identifier. Like CVE is a name. It is an ID. It says what the vulnerability is. Next is CVSS. CVSS gives the vulnerability a security score. That is, it tells you how dangerous it is. So CVSS is a score and it tells us how severe it is. Both of these together form the backbone of vulnerability management. For example, consider this vulnerability CVE 2021 44228. CVSS score for this is 10, that is critical. Description is remote code execution in Apache Log4j, and the impact is widely exploited globally. And that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked today's video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our videos. That helps us a lot. I will see you in another video with more questions on vulnerability management. Thank you.